This video is the replay of a live masterclass we hosted a few months ago for BIM Pure members. If you enjoy it, you can watch the back catalog that includes more than 25 live masterclasses, and you can also get links to attend all of the upcoming events on topics such as Revit, families, Dynamo, ACC, BIM, and more. Enroll now at bimpure.com. Now we can get to the main meal and talk about model health. So what are the downsides of bad model health in Revit models? So why is this something we should even care about in the first place? So the downside, it means that your Revit model is going to be slow, it's going to be heavy, it's going to take a long time to sync, long time to open, it's confusing to navigate, you have unreliable model information, it's a bad experience for the users, it makes the user unhappy, they will complain, they will not have great experience at work. And it's difficult to use for coordination and clash detection. So if you work with different engineers, different firms, you try to link the models together. If you have bad model health, it makes everything more complex, right? And more difficult to obtain. And if you do clash detection, it's going to be a bit more challenging. So if you want to know what are the upsides of good model health, well, take everything in that list and it's the opposite, right? So it's fast, it's lean, it's fast to sync, fast to open. I mean, it depends, right? If you have a heavy, complex project, it'll still take some time. But hopefully, all of the rest, it should be a good experience for the users, the information will be reliable, and so on. I like to think of model health as something you should try to maintain for the entire duration of the project. And the comparison I like to make is when you enter a house where it's kind of messy, it's kind of chaotic in there, maybe you don't pay attention too much to how clean it is, and you might not care if you make a mess. While if you enter a house that's all clean, well, you'd be much more careful, right? You don't want to mess up the clean house. And I've seen some projects where things get into that spiral, right? It becomes so messy, it becomes so chaotic in there, and there was not a good upkeep, keeping up with the model health as the project progress. And then at the end, they're trying to fix it, but it's kind of too late in some cases, or almost too late. And in some cases, the worst case scenario could have a project that is so corrupted that you cannot open it or you cannot sync, right? I've seen that happen a few times. And so the BIM managers are desperately trying to go back and fix, but in some cases it can be a disaster, long hours missed, and you miss the deadlines to create the deliverables. Okay. So try to avoid that. The whole goal of the presentation will be to show how you can avoid this. So the opposite of that is the joy of healthy Revit models. You enter the model, everything is kind of obvious. The project browser is well organized. It's fun, it's easy and simple to navigate the project and find good information. And to me, I love high quality modeling where you could take a measure, take a dimension anywhere in the model, and you know it's going to be accurate. You can use this information. It's reliable. Because on a model where we have bad model health and bad modeling techniques, you cannot rely on the model because there's so much 2D techniques that have been used to fix and patch the model. You cannot take a dimension because the team would say, no, actually, we didn't actually model this thing. You got to look on the sheet to get the real information. Okay, so in the course of this presentation, I'm going to show you all the signs of bad model health. So I'm going to spend a lot of time on the more technical aspects that you should know. But something I've realized, especially as a consultant, is often only the technical aspects are not enough. There's also the human aspects, which comes to training, guidance, change management, technical depth, dealing with what I call mavericks. You know, we all have in our firms someone who's a little more, how to put it, they like to do things their own way, right? You have this list of norm and they like, I'm actually an artist, you know, I'm an architect for the big A, and I don't like to follow the rules. I like to do things my own way. Yeah, so I see some of you laughing, right? This sounds familiar. All right, so I think it's actually important because I've realized, I've seen some people are technically speaking, everything is perfect, but they have maybe they lack some skills when it comes to dealing with change management and training and guidance. So at the end of the presentation, I'll talk a little bit about it. But for now, we'll spend a bit of time. Just give me a sec here. Okay, let's go. The signs of a bad model health. So this is more on the technical side. I posted this meme recently on LinkedIn as I was researching the topic of model health. I came across this great video of the BIM guru, Kevin Crump, All this content is amazing. And you talk about the importance of file size and his rule of thumb. Again, it's a rule of thumb. It's not a precise rule, but it's roughly anything above 500 megabytes is a sign that the model is perhaps too big. It's so again, it's you don't have to follow this in every single project, but it's a good rule of thumb. And I think of that, Gavin calls that a big chungus. You can watch the entire video of Diaz BIM Guru. I've put a link in there. And I've got to say, it's not silly that heavy model size automatically means that the model is going to be slow, but there's typically a correlation. So a heavy Revit model means there's probably some bad stuff in there that cause the model to slow down. But overall, a larger model is going to make everything more slow, takes some more time to sync, and so on. When I work with firms and they're asking me, can you open this model and check out what is going on if we have good model health, the first thing that I'll look at is the project browser. And it's really a good sign. It gives me a preview of what I'm going to see. So if I see something like this, where the views are completely disorganized, you don't know what's going on, you can see that the views are not getting clean or properly sorted or organized, it's usually not a good sign. And I can expect that I'll find other bad things inside of that model. While the other way around, if I have a project browser that is well organized, everything's in order, the views are properly named, it has a logic, it makes sense, but I expect that the rest of the model is probably going to be pretty good. I mean, it's the same if you go into someone's house and it's a complete mess. You can expect that maybe it's not the most organized person and the other way around, right? So it's a bit similar to the models. In terms of solution for the project browsers, first you should have a strong project browser organization. You should think about it beforehand. There's a few ways that I like to work to do so. And inside your template, you can indicate the best way to name the views, right? And also, I like to tell my users that once a week, I will clean the views and delete all the views that are not properly sorted and placed in the correct category. So this way users are warned, and if they don't properly set up the views, they're going to be deleted. So I could do a whole session just about project browser organization. I have lots of strong opinions about it, but this is the BIM Pure template. And the way I like to work, there are other ways that are good as well, but the way I like to work is using the view types. So you can see these are view types. If you're wondering how you can create a view type, you can go to edit type, duplicate, and I could have 1.9. I like to use numbering for different kind of views. Floor plans are going to be 1, ceilings are going to be 2, and so on. Let's say that I call this work plan view. And you can see that this is added inside of the project browser. So I don't personally like to use organizing parameters, but some people do. Most people use this technique, in fact. And just so if you are curious, if I go to project browser organization, so this is the way that I work. It's the views are sorted by family first and then by type. Anyone else organizing their views like this? I'm just curious. I know most people are using organizing parameter, but this works really well. It really works well. Okay. Okay, another sign, something that worries me a lot when I open Revit files is too many levels. And I still see this kind of a lot is, for example, people will create an additional level for the plywood and for the ceiling. And if there's a stairs, maybe they'll create a level for the middle of the stairs and so on. So this is not a good practice. What you should do is when you create levels, stick to one level per level, right? Level 1, level 2, roof. Sometimes some like a key structural level can be fine. But what I just wouldn't do is having, for example, over here, level 2 ceiling, and then another one over here that would be level stairs. So avoid this, try to reduce the amount of levels. And why is that the case? Because if you create a wall, in the drop down of the constraints, you can see all of the levels. Same thing if you place doors and windows, for example, you can put them in any of these levels. And sometimes I see that the doors and the elements are in the wrong level, which can cause problems when it comes time to do scheduling. So try to reduce the amount of level. I know some people create levels just for the symbol. That would be more in beginner side. But if you go to the Annotate tab and you use spot elevation right here, that's not the case in here, but you can create a symbol of the spot elevation that looks exactly identical to the level, right? Okay, so the other things that I see is when the elements such as walls in a model are not set to the proper constraint. So for example, if I have my top constraint, in this case, it's good. You can see that this wall is go to a 3D view. It's going to be easier. I have this wall. Right now it's set to roof, but sometimes I see people, for example, they'll do something like this, where the wall is unconnected, and then they'll just play with the arrows and it creates this huge unconnected height. Or something else that is not recommended, if I put it to level 1, for example. Okay, is it crashed? So while Revit is thinking, hoping it didn't crash, let's go back to the slides while that's going on. Okay, so something else, I still see this and it drives me crazy. I feel that we're starting to see less and less of this. Like this used to be the bigger problem, especially when people were doing lots of CAD to Revit transition. I feel the bulk of it, we've passed that, but I still see this sometimes, is that people will model, especially the large elements, the key architectural elements, using 2D lines like this. You can see this is the stairs that someone drew using 2D lines. So obviously not good. So what I'll hear from people is say, we don't really need to model it. We just need to see it on the floor plan. It's not going to be changed. So what's the point in modeling it? But almost every time I hear that, it ends up causing problem in the long run, right? Because you don't have it in 3D view. So just take time to model things, and you should discourage your team from using kind of a cheap 2D workarounds like this. So it seems like my Revit has crashed. So let me open another instance. Okay, the imported file, that's an obvious one, but if you import a CAD file or a PDF or an image inside of your project, well, it's going to add to the file size. So if you import a CAD file that weighs 2 megabytes, it's like you import 2 more megabytes inside of your Revit file, which will make your file bulkier and larger. Same thing with images in CAD. The only exceptions I can think of for images, if you have title blocks, you might have a logo, right? So it's a bit hard to link, because if you send to other people, it's hard to keep the link. In this case, though, like make sure to reduce the image size before inserting it, right? So just resize the image so it fits exactly the space you need. Because if you have big image, 2 megabytes, and you just scale it down, it's still going to weigh 2 megabytes, right? Revit doesn't kind of reduce the file size of the image for you. Same thing for PDF. So link, always better, right? Okay, Revit is still crashed on this side. Let's open a new one. Classic Revit. Okay. Something else. Yeah, I'll be curious about that. How many of you, if you can type in the chat, do you use lots of work sets for visibility? Because my advice typically is try to avoid work sets for visibility for most things, right? The exceptions can be for links, like structural. I typically like to create one work set for the structural model, one for MEP, and so on. But it's typically a bad sign when I open a model and I see lots of work sets that are basically the same thing as the categories. So work set for ceilings, a work sets for walls. And people, especially former AutoCAD users, like to use work set in a similar way to AutoCAD layers, which is not the way work sets are intended to be used. So it's something to be avoided, because work sets don't, you have to manually place them in the correct work set, right? And if you don't do so, you will have problems. But that's always the case. Things are always in the wrong work set. So most people in the chat seems not be big fans of work sets, but it's still being used a lot. That's something I still see with a lot of clients. They're still in love with their use of work set for visibility. But I'm trying to train them to use view templates, view filters, instead of using work sets. People ask, Brian, do you have a good reason for not using them for visibility? Yeah, well, as I've said, they can get, you have to manually place them in the right work set. So it's an extra thing to manage that you don't really need to, because view filters and categories and the visibility graphics menu can replace all of that work that you do manually, but it's more automatic. It requires a longer time to set up the view templates for sure in your template. But once it's done, everything is set and you don't have to worry about this anymore. So I still have a lot of education to do about the topic of work sets. People saying we only use 4 work set, grids and levels, element, DWG and links, Revit links. Yeah, something like this makes sense to me. The only way that exception I would make, and the intended use of work sets, it's actually for performance. If you have a very large model, let's say you have 2 parts of a building, right? Let's say the east wing of the building and the west wing of the building. You could use work sets and place them in different ones. So if a user is working on one part of the building, they can decide to not open the other part, and it's going to make their model faster and have a better performance. So that's one good use of work sets. For visibility, not so much. It's a bit redundant with other tools that are available inside of Revit. Okay. It's a big topic, work sets. Lots of people talking about it. Yeah, work set, people are saying that it's mostly for coordination between the disciplines. I agree. That's a way that I feel that works pretty good. I know even some people don't even use work sets for it. Love seeing work sets called do not open, do not use. Yeah, I've seen a lot of that. Okay, I'll see meanwhile if I'll just open this in the background while I keep talking. So let's talk about model groups. Again, it's a whole topic by itself. I've actually once did a talk at the Build conference where I just talk about model groups. So I have mixed feelings about groups. They're helpful in certain kind of projects. I use them a lot, especially multi-family housing. For different apartments, groups are the way to go, not Revit links, in my opinion. With that said, sometimes people can get pretty intense with groups. So a bad practice is to have lots of groups within groups, so nested groups. That's something to avoid. Because typically speaking, families are faster than groups, and groups are heavier than families. So if you can use a family instead of a group, it's better to do so. An example would be if you have a table and chairs, instead of placing different families and grouping them together, what you should do instead is create a new family that has both the table and the chair. It's going to be much faster inside your model. So don't go too far with groups. It applies to model groups, but also detail groups. So what I'm saying here is not don't use model groups, just be careful and use them carefully, and don't add too many of them in your project. So while that's going on here, let me create a new project. Just a minute. Hoping Revit doesn't crash on me again. And detailed groups should be named properly. Yeah, of course, think about having a proper naming conventions for your groups. And if you have that warning that says fixed group, well, it's a lie. Autodesk is lying to you. It's not actually fixing the group. It's just duplicating the group or ungrouping. So don't use this thing. Something else that I see in a lot of projects that is a sign of bad model health is the inconsistent use of view templates. So I look at the views, and some of them have view templates, some of them don't have view templates. And I see a lot of, especially beginners, when they see a view template, they like to remove them, right? And by default, you cannot lock view templates to views. I know with some add-ins such as Guardian, perhaps you can. So let me open this. So for example, in the BIM Pure template, all of the views have a view template assigned to them. And when I create a new view, something you can do in the edit type is you see here, it says new views are dependent on template. So you set your view template, and whenever you create a new view, the template is going to be applied, right? So let me give you an example. If I create a new plan view, I pick this one, and you can see the view template is here, right? So make sure to set that up and tell the users not to remove them. And if users are like, well, I just want to modify a few things for internal work, what you can do is ask them to duplicate the view and add their name. That's what I do, at least. And let's say that let's try that again. I rename the view and I add my name, and I can remove copy one. And then I modify, you can use classifying parameters, or you can switch to another view type. So in this case, I put it to floor plan work, just right here. So I know this is my view, and I can remove the view template in this one because it's not a view that's going to be printed or placed on sheets. So I can do whatever I want. Or else, something else that some people don't know is you have this feature that's called enable temporary view properties. So you can, just for a few minutes, you can change the view scale, for example, and mess around. And yeah, change some settings. And at the end, when you're done, you can restore and go back to the original properties. Just ask your users to not remove the view template, right? In some cases, maybe you don't have to add every single options and parameters inside of the view template. You might decide, well, the view scale, in fact, it doesn't need to be there. We have similar views that have different scales. So it's okay to remove some of these options. Sophia says, I prefer to ask the users to write the theme of the view and not their name. Yeah, it's possible. That's one way I like to do it, because I like to place a specific person to a view, but there's different ways you can do it. Okay, I think people name seems to be controversial. Yeah, that's possible. That's possible. I like things to be accountable inside of projects, so I can put a name and a figure in people. I can say that this view has been created by this person, for example, although there are other ways to do it. So yeah, the name is an example, but you don't have to do it this way. Okay. Okay, another one, too many heavy families. So when it comes to families, 1 MB seems to be the limits in most cases for the maximum file size of the families. In certain cases, it could go up to 2 MB, in my opinion. Like if you have a door family that is contain multiple types, different panels, for example, in this case, I feel it could be acceptable to go above, but it has to be justified. So if you have a heavy family, it should be a critical family inside of your project. It should be important and should be justified that it's heavy. Else, if it's just kind of family that is not that important, it shouldn't be heavy. So that's an example of an elevator family that was found on the website BIM Object, which is not a good website. I don't recommend you downloading families from there. It's a family made for manufacturers, and they don't pay a lot of attention to high quality of the families. And it just will make your models heavier. So be careful with BIM Object. So looking at the file size is a pretty good way to spot them, but not the only. You can have a family that's relatively lightweight, but it still has a lot of junk parameters and doesn't work for your projects. So another topic where I could talk for a while. I see Brian says, I use BIM Object quite a bit. Yeah, I would recommend, if you use BIM Object, two alternatives that are not perfect, but a notch better than BIM Object. BIMcontent.com. It's from Australia, though. And BIM Smith. Again, it's manufacturer families, it's never optimal, right? Because the families is made for the pleasure of the manufacturer. And they tend to be a bit more heavy and have too much information compared to what you need. But they're still better. And else you can buy high quality families. Or the best is, in fact, to build your own library, customize. But manufacturer families problematic. So another point about that, why should you pay so much attention to the size of the families? This is an example, again, from the Aussie BIM Guru in this video about model health. That was pretty mind-blowing. So he said that there was a print job on a Revit project that went from, it took 5 minutes to print a set of PDFs to 8 hours. And the team was like, well, that's just a big project. It takes 8 hours to print the PDF now. So they said, wait a minute, there's something wrong in there. Let's find out what's the culprit. Why does it take so long? It turns out it was this chair family that has been placed, let's say 1,000 times out of a project, that caused everything to be much more slow. And the culprit in this case, you can see this is imported geometry, lots of polygon and faces, just for a chair. That doesn't even matter. It's just basically an accessory in the project, right? We're architecture, not we're doing architecture, not designing a furniture. And especially in families, you can decide if 3D geometry is visible in the plan view or not. In this case, it was. So it means for every single plan view, it had to calculate this geometry, even though maybe it only looked like a rectangle inside of the sheet. So the lesson here is don't use complex families like this inside of your project. Try to make it everything lean, simple, and simplify the geometry. If you really want to do a precise rendering, maybe you can use a different model or a linked model to place this kind of stuff inside of it. But if you're having a long print time, it might be because of families that have too many imported geometry and that are still visible in plan views, especially if the instance has been placed multiple times. Okay, something that drives me crazy that I still see way too often is if you look at your line styles inside of Revit model and you see something like this, that's a terrible sign. That's because someone exploded a CAD file inside of the Revit model. And when you explode a CAD file inside of a Revit model, all the layers are going to be converted to line styles, right? So if you have lots of layers, like in this case, all the layers are going to be like this. I still see it way too often, right? So I think the explode CAD tool inside of a project, it should be locked. No one should use it. So if you really want to do something like this, you should create a dummy Revit project where you explode the CAD inside of the main project and get the information you need. I would recommend like switching all the line styles to use line styles from Revit, and probably to clean the CAD file beforehand too, right? Purge, overkill, so on. But just don't explode CAD files inside of your main project. Just don't do it. Else, inside of a family could work in certain cases too, but it's just something to be extremely careful about. Bartek says, solution to fixing this, well, don't do it. If you have to do it inside of another project and copy and paste, but clean after you explode, but then clean it before you bring it, okay? Yeah, Matt says that Guardian has been very good for this. Indeed, yeah, Guardian is a plugin that can help you prevent users from using certain bad commands. I'll mention it later on. Peter says link the CAD file instead. Yeah, you can use link in certain cases. That's better. What do you recommend if it was already done? I knew it's a common problem. I see it all the time. What could be done? Well, you can actually delete all these line styles and they will revert back to the standard one, the default line style. That's something you can do, but it's that would make me worried because it now means that there's a lot of kind of dumb random lines inside of your model. Delete and purge, yeah, probably so. Fake tags and fake dimensions. Again, I feel that as we move slowly year by year, I see less of this kind of thing, but I still see it a lot. So that means instead of using an actual tag for wall, I see some people would draw with lines or regions a fake tag and enter by text instead of using actual tag. So that's bad. Don't do this. It will cause confusion. Again, I sometimes hear the reason is, well, this will not change, right? We're not going to change the numbering of the wall. So that's sometimes used to justify it using 2D techniques, but that's never true. It always changes. It always changes. So, and the BIM model, the goal is to have high quality of data, right? So if you use cheap techniques like this, it means you compromise the quality of your models and the information inside of it. Yeah. Sam says, find the user and retrain. That's right. If you have someone that explode the CAD file, you have to talk to that user for sure. Okay, the hide tool inside of Revit. I remember when I started using Revit, I was pretty excited about it because we don't really have that in AutoCAD, where you can take an element and you can just hide in the view, right? Pretty nice, but you can still see it in other views. But it's not considered good practice to use the hide tool. So why is that the case? Because it's not a systematic enough way to control the visibility of elements, right? So why should you hide the wall in this case? And if I have furniture here, for example, if I want to hide the furniture, the proper way of doing it is going to my view template, going to the visibility graphics, finding the furniture category and unchecking it. So that's the correct way of controlling visibility and not selecting the element and manually hiding it. So inside of BIM, you should always try to think in a systematic way to control things instead of doing things in a one-by-one basis. So the less hidden view that you use inside your models, the better it is for you and the less issues you're going to have. Let's talk about model in place, a tool that most BIM managers are not the biggest fan of. So model in place, the worst thing you can do with this tool is to, I'll show it. It's, where's it? Oh, here. Yeah, model in place. I hope it doesn't crash again. So model in place, you can model things directly inside the model without using loadable families. So let's say this is a model in place. And the problem is when people use model in place and they copy and paste the model in place. So the problem with this is that let's say that you have model in place that weighs 500 kilobytes. Whenever you copy and paste, it means that you had an extra 500 kilobytes each time you copy and paste. Where in this case, what you should do is use a loadable family instead. Because if you use a loadable family, the first one, the family is going to weigh, let's say 500 kilobytes, but each additional instance is going to weigh about 2 kilobytes, right? Because the key information is inside of the loadable family, which is not the case with model in place. So in some model, I see one model in place has been copied and pasted 1,000 times. That's not good. So I know this will make the model heavier. So I will refrain from using model in place almost completely, some exceptions where this is acceptable, when it's really a one-off element. Let's say an example that I've heard is like a fireplace or something along those lines that you would not reuse into another project. You will not copy and paste it again. In this case, it might be acceptable, but that's about the only exception I would give. So I'd be curious to know how other BIM managers deal with model in place. I know most people don't allow this tool to be used. In some smaller project, if it's really a one-off, it's okay. But if you have to copy and paste it, you shouldn't use this tool at all. Yeah, the first rule of Model in Place Club is not to use Model in Place. Second rule of, yeah, that's about right. But if you group it before copy and paste, yeah, still not good. Just trying how to see people. How do you feel about model in place, custom light fixtures? Yeah, not good. Use a loadable family instead. Yeah, use loadable families for almost everything. Like loadable families in terms of performance and model health, it's the best practice. Okay, what else do we have? Junk parameters. So how many of you have these in your projects where you click on elements and you see a bunch of random parameters, you're not too sure where these came from, right? Well, often the problem is that you work on a project and someone will say, can you go find that old information in that project we did 5 years ago? Or in that other firm we're working with, they have something interesting. Let's copy and paste it to our project. But they have project parameters that when you copy and paste to the new project, you bring all that stuff over. So all that bunch of random parameters are going to be inserted as well. And often they're kind of useless. They have no additional information. So the solution to this is just get rid of them, purge them, delete all parameters that you don't actually need. So of course, in your template, you should be careful about the amount of parameters. But in the course of a project, if you copy from other projects, you might find yourself with some of these. So it's just the job of the BIM coordinator or the BIM manager to remove them. Okay. Yeah, I see someone in the chat saying how to make a balcony, model a rail in place, array 100 times, group model. Yeah, that's a good way to destroy your model. I've actually seen stuff like that. Paul asked, how do you remove junk parameter easiest? Okay, when it comes to parameter, I really like the D-Roots one tool that is called Paramanager. I'm not sure if it's going to be paid because D-Roots announced that their plugins are going to be freemium model now. So I'm not sure if this one specifically, I think it's still going to be free. But in here, you can see in this project, we don't have a lot of project parameters or shared parameters, but you can have a list of them all and delete them if necessary. So that's the way I would do it. And you can delete multiple parameters at once, with the regular project parameter tools in Revit, you have to do it one by one. Well, I guess in this, you could be relatively quick, but I really like the Paramanager. Too many reference planes. Reference planes, it's a good tool. It can be helpful. You can see, you can place one one reference planes over here, and in the level number 2, it's still going to be there. So when trying to coordinate between different levels, it's pretty helpful. But some people, I'll admit I don't use this tool as much. I use it a little bit, but some people really like this tool a lot, and they create a lot of reference planes. So I'd be curious if some of you are a huge reference planes fan. But what I say is give a name. And what I typically say is give a name to your reference planes, else we're going to delete them. So all Friday, I like to delete the reference planes in the project that have not been named. So if you have an important reference plane that you want to keep inside of your project, give a name so we know exactly what it is. Else, because I've seen projects with 1,000 reference planes, so it's hard to know if one is actually important or not. So naming them is a good way to make sure, yeah, this one actually matters. How do you delete them? A tool? Well, you can delete them manually, just select and delete. Else, I did for a client a Dynamo script that would find all unnamed reference planes. And yeah, you could delete them too. Yeah, maybe I should release that somewhere. Yeah, is there a way to list all reference planes in model? I did it with Dynamo. I don't know if there's a tool like in D-Root or something that does it. Maybe in Wipe? Maybe not. I'm sure there's a way somewhere. So that's my list of the key things to watch for. I would be curious if you have anything else that I missed that you think is kind of a sign of bad model health or just a bad practice. So you can let me know in the chat. And I also added to the post, I'll provide a PDF link afterwards. This is an article from Modelical, where they have just a list of good practices. So it's relatively similar to everything we just discussed, but it has a few extra things about modeling and consistency. Lots of great information there. So it will be in the PDF that I'll give afterwards. Let's see what else. Yeah, discussions about complex geometry and use less parameter. Complex geometry, yeah, it's often imported and linked or geometry made in other software that can cause lots of problems. I don't know, Sam, if you had other things to add regarding that. Over modeling, too much industry detail. Yeah, that's a good one from Ryan. You have to be careful about how much you go into detail. It has to be detailed enough that the model is reliable, but you don't want to go overboard, right? You need to model for the needs. So you shouldn't model screws and elements. I've heard some while ago that the rule of thumb was about 4-inch, so 100 millimeters. That's you should not model things that are smaller than that. It depends, of course, of the category and so on. But yeah, so somebody mentioned the warnings. We're going to get to it. Unpin linked. Yeah, make sure to pin all the Revit links. We're going to talk about the warnings now. Observe LOD. Why are reference planes bad health? No, it's just too many of them, Beto. It's just if you have too many of them, they're unnamed, it's confusing. So just give them a name. And if they have good reason to be there, it's fine. Generic models. Yeah, it's better to have more categories when you export to IFC. Okay, so let's talk about warnings now. I see it's kind of its own category of things to discuss. So first, warnings, they're different from errors. An error in Revit is saying, you cannot do this, stop it. While the warning, it's more like Revit is saying, I really don't like what you're doing right now, but I will not prevent you from doing it, but it's not cool, and I'm not happy with it. That's basically what a warning is. It's Revit not being happy with what you're doing, but it doesn't stop you from doing so. So a few warnings in a project is normal. Having zero warning in a big project, especially, it's very rare and hard to obtain. And not all warnings are made equal. So overall, it's really something you should keep an eye on. Typically, I say every Friday is the day you should check out the warnings and find a way to clean them out. A few years ago, I assisted a talk by Richard Taylor of Ideate Software, who made some tests about warnings, because we hear a lot of things, they're bad from the file size, for performance and so on, but they've actually tested it, and we have some stats. So they've had a project with 245 warnings, and one that only had 15. And they've tested a few things. You can see the file size, not a big difference, right? So after solving the warnings, there was only about 1 MB of difference. However, when they perform a certain series of tasks, the time that it took to do these tasks without the warnings was much faster. So the lesson here is that warnings that might not affect the file size, but they will affect how long it takes to do different tasks inside of your model. So that's why you should clean them out. There are three types of warnings inside of Revit: common warnings, calculated warnings, and geometric warnings. And the most crucial ones are calculated and geometric. These are the ones that will actually affect the performance of your model. So whenever you have walls that are overlapping, identical instances, attached but misses targets, these kinds of warnings, that's what actually slows down your project. And if you're doing MEP and you have no loss defined, can calculate the flow, these are actually also pretty bad and can affect the performance. While common warnings can include identical duplicate marks, lines slightly off axis, and typically you should solve them, but they will not cause that much of a performance issues. So you all add this one, right? That drives me crazy. This line is in sketch is slightly off axis and may cause inaccuracies. Just a minute, looking at the chat. Okay, so this one is extremely annoying, but it should not cause too much performance issues inside of your project. But if you can solve it, good. But if not, it's not the end of the work. And also, duplicate type mark, also a very annoying warning. You should fix it because it means you have data problem inside of your model. But again, it should not cause too much performance issues. The warnings that are a big deal and that you should solve are identical warnings. So if you have overlapping walls, identical instances, that's what has impact on the performance, because anything where Revit has to calculate the geometry, if it has a problem in a warning, it will be slowed down. So my recommendation, again, I could do a complete talk about warnings. But a few tips. First, I like to indicate on the opening page, the welcome page that I call, or the starting view inside of Revit, how many warnings there are with the date below it. It can be automated with Dynamo. I know there are some better ways. You can have dashboards. I'm going to talk about it afterwards. But just keeping track of how many warnings and cleaning them out once a week and indicating the new value, just so people are aware of it at least, right? And you don't get to like 3,000 warnings and people didn't realize it. Okay, now I'm going to talk about some solutions to keep healthy Revit models. So overall, the best way to keep healthy files is preventive, right? It's to vaccinate your Revit models against bad health. And so that can include having, of course, a great template. The better your template, the less likely you are to have bad model health. Training and standard operating procedures, like everything should be clear for the end users. And prevent bad model health from occurring in the first place. But even with all that preventive care, you still have ongoing maintenance to do, right? So as a BIM manager or BIM coordinator, what are the things you should do? The things to track? Some of them are easy, some of them are a bit more complex, some are a bit more nuanced. So the file size and the number of warnings, that's pretty easy. That's the number, right? So you can keep track of that number, see how it evolves on the time. And if the file size is too high or the number of warnings too high, you can try to solve it. The project browsers, that's an easy one. It's pretty obvious if it's messy or well organized. Same thing with the naming convention. Something's a bit more difficult or a bit more nuanced, the quality of modeling. That requires a bit more actually clicking on the things and seeing are they done to find out if the quality of modeling is there or not, and the quality of the loadable families and the overuse of 2D elements. So I'm going to show you a few tools you can use to keep track of that. There's also the purge tool. So the purge tool is helpful to remove all the stuff that is not actually used inside of a project. But typically, I recommend using it later inside of a project. You shouldn't use it when it starts, right? Because maybe you have things that are in the project that is going to be used when it comes time to the CDs, construction documents, but you're not ready yet. So typically when the complete set of sheets has been created and I'm at the, let's say, late stage of the project, that's when I start to use the purge. Even then, I like to do a selective purge. So if I go to Revit and I go to the purge tool that is right here, you can purge everything. But typically, I still like to kind of have a look at what I'm purging, not to purge things that could be helpful later on. But it's still something that you definitely use. And in fact, you can purge a few times. As you can see, I purged once, and when I purge again, more stuff to be purged. Sometimes you have to do kind of 3-4 runs until everything has been purged. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of things going on in the chat. Okay, an audit. Audit. So, in fact, just today I had someone saying that they had trouble opening the model. Something you can do is when you open the Revit file, you can check on this box that says audit if you're using ACC. When you open the model, you click on the dots and there's open with audit. This takes a bit longer, but it checks for corruption and tries to fix it. So that's something I like to do at least once a week. Okay, now I'm going to talk about some tools and plugins that you can use to help you solve and keep track of all this stuff. The first one with PyRevit has so many great stuff that in fact I used to recommend Autodesk plugin that is called the interoperability tools, but I found that actually PyRevit is pretty great. So there are 3 PyRevit tools that I recommend. The first one is pre-flight checks, the second one inspect family size, and the third one lines per view counter. So let's go with the first one, and that is, let's use this on this project. So I have PyRevit, I use the pre-flight checks. Is 2025 supported yet? I don't think so in terms of PyRevit. That's one of the downside of PyRevit. Let's run the check. Yeah, okay. So when you run the pre-flight checks, you will get this warning. That's fine. Click yes. And what I like about this, it's very fast compared to other techniques that I've used to check the model health. So you can see, let's have a look. This is what you get. And I like this. It gives you a really quick overview. Maybe it's not perfect, doesn't have everything. And you can go into nuance yourself to see everything. But it still, you can see there's 154 views not placed on views not placed on the sheet. Unused view templates, 22 critical warnings. So it separates warnings. It creates special category for the critical ones, probably when overlapping geometry in this case, I would guess. You can see there are a lot of line patterns, probably could be purged. 1 imported CAD, too many generic models and as loadable families. What else we have? You can see 423 no-name reference planes. So none of the reference planes in this model have been named, right? So they didn't follow my advice. You can see too how many elements are placed in the project divided by category. So it's a great tool to have a quick look. So whenever I am tasked with having a look at the model health of a project for a client, I look at the project browser, like I've said. I look at the 3D view, I see what's going on. I see if there's a lot of imported and linked files, and then I run the pre-flight checks, and it gives me a quick overview. And then the other tool that I like is inspect. You have list family size over here. I will not run it. This one can take 15 minutes or more, but it lists all the families inside of the project. I think I have a screenshot of it. Yeah, this is the result that you get. This is from the Revit sample, the new sample file, the Snowden Towers. You can see everything has been created by Paul Aubin. And yeah, it lists the family. You can list by size. So the heaviest family will be on top. That gives me an overview. Okay, is there a lot of super heavy families that should be purged? So in this case, a few of them, but it's nothing too bad, right? But sometimes I see, oh my God, like there's like a 20 megabytes family inside of this project. What is going on? Or sometimes I see multiple super heavy families. So another great tool. I really like this one too. That is lines per view counter. So I've mentioned how bad 2D techniques are for model health. By running this, I can know, for example, in this view, R2 roof plan layout sketch, there are 257 lines that have been placed, 2D lines instead of modeling. And that's not that big of a deal. I see projects where there are thousands of lines. But like the more 2D lines are in the project, the worse it typically is, because it means that people work around 2D techniques instead of 3D modeling, right? So typically I would run this and go to the view and see what's going on and see if it's something that should be fixed, and talk to the people that have created the view to see if they're using the best practices. Yeah, Peter says that firms are reluctant to pay for plugins. This one is free though, by Revit. What is considered as a heavy family? How many warnings in a model is acceptable? It depends on the size of the model, right? But I try to keep it below 200 personally. I've seen model where it gets 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. That's not good. Okay, let's keep on going. This tool is really sneaky. It's who did that. It lets you know who created or modified a specific element. It only works in work shared model. So this is not a work shared model, so I cannot actually use it. But you can see here who did that. You select an element, and it tells you who created the element and the last person that modified it, right? Because I can remind myself in one of the projects a few years ago, there was a slab just the day before we did construction set PDF documents. There was a slab, concrete slab floating in the middle of the project, right? So someone moved it by mistake. So you can use this tool to sneak and see who actually modified the element and go have a talk with them. So that's, again, PyRevit. Another one, there used to be a tool called Isolate Warnings. It was standalone plugins, but I found that this tool by Eric Fritz, an EF tool, is pretty good. So it's a PyRevit extension. To activate it, if you go to PyRevit, you go to settings. No, I said setting. No, it's not settings, extensions. So let me try that again. I go to extensions and I find, where is it? EF tools. Yeah, EF tool, there it is. It's actually already active in my case, but you can install, oh, maybe it's not, no, that's PyCharts. Yeah, it's already installed, but you can enable it, and there it is, EF tools. So it has a lot of interesting features, but here I have isolate warnings. And here I recommend using single view for all. So I will create a view for all of the checked warning. And I will hide the context. And let's click on isolate warnings. And I'll show you what it does. Yeah, so the view has been created. Let's find it. Where is it? Where is it? There it is. EF warning. So these are all the elements afflicted by warning, and you can see them with a red override. And then it's easier to kind of spot them in context. Whenever I have to solve warning, I like to use this tool so I can isolate them quickly, because it's pretty annoying to try to find the element with the warning, right? You can try to click on open, find the view, but it doesn't work very well. So I would recommend using this free tool by Eric Fritz. Katerina says you can also use work sharing display workset and hover over an element, and it shows who created and updated the element. Yeah, that's right. In replacement of the who did that tool that I mentioned earlier. Is there a way to deploy a PyRevit extension firm-wide? There are ways, but I think that's a whole other topic. That's something I think with Eric Fritz that's coming next month we can talk about. We can ask him about it. I'll ask him to prepare something because it's a great question. Okay, Ideate Explorer. So that's a paid plugin, but it's pretty popular, especially on larger firms. And what I like about this, you have a warnings menu, and you can see the warnings are categorized by the importance on how critical they are. So they have red for the warnings you should immediately fix, yellow for bad but not that bad, and green for warnings that are not that big of a deal in terms of performance. So that's Ideate. Guardian, we've already mentioned them. So this is a plugin that can help prevent users from using specific tools. Like you could lock, for example, the explode CAD file. You could prevent users from using that tool altogether. But it can also help you track everything going on inside of your model. So if there's a warning, you can track who created the warning, who is responsible for specific warnings. And yeah, it does a lot more. You can send messages to your entire team. So basically, in terms of model health, it's a pretty interesting plugin. The link is over there. I would check it out. Another one that's more for naming conventions. So if the naming conventions are kind of a mess inside of your project, the Deroots Family Revisor, sorry, it's right over here. Family Revisor. And I go to Edit. And let's say that I want to add, I see that that's all in French, sorry. But I could decide to add a prefix to all of these families, for example. Let's say that I had the BP for BIM Pure prefix. And I hit apply, and you can see they've been added. So you can modify the naming conventions of your element. Because, yeah, I think it's not necessarily that would hurt the performance of the model in terms of speed. But if there's no naming convention in your projects, it's pretty bad. It makes a worse experience for the users. If you rename the family, the filter breaks. Yeah, it's not. You shouldn't rename the family in the middle of a project. Typically, sometimes it's at the end if I have to send the family to the project to the client. It's typically more in the template that I try to fix this. It says Revit for 2025 is available. We're required to rename families contractually a lot. Yeah, that's typically that's something I would do at the end of the project. But can it cause issues with your filters? Maybe. I would try to have other ways of using filters in this case. Okay, in terms of dashboards now, another great video by the BIM Guru where he showcased this is a loadable family that you can see here. And by running the Dynamo script, for example, depending on how many warnings you have and so on, like the family is going to be updated. So the pros of that is that it's going to be placed it's directly in the Revit project, so you see it immediately when you open the project. So if you want to learn more about it, check out the BIM Guru video. I know some people also mentioned some Power BI tools. I saw that in the chat. So that's also, I don't have much information to give you now about it, but it's another great way to do it. And I had a Reop based in Norway who sent me this before the session. So it's something they've built for a client and decided to make it public. It's under the dashboard, so you can check them out. It's called Radar by Rehope. Okay, so that's for the tools to manage model health. And the final part of the session should be quite short. Maybe you have 10, 15 more minutes. The technical depth and the human aspects. So in this part, I've mentioned everything technical, but I want to talk more about from a human side, how you deal with this, because I found, that's my experience, that's often the most important and something we don't pay that much attention to. So recently I had a discussion with Paul Wintour of Parametric Monkey, and has this great article called The Technical Data in Architecture. And he mentions that similarly, that's a concept in software, is that sometimes you take shortcut, right? In the example of a Revit project, maybe instead of using 3D modeling techniques, you will do a quick workaround, a cheap trick to get the deliverables ready in time, right? So that might use using 2D lines instead of 3D modeling. So in some cases, maybe you're really forced. I mean, you have to send a PDF set. So if that's the case, you should at least use some sort of ledger where you keep track of all the cheap tricks that you use and come back later to solve them. Another interesting thing that Paul mentioned, that's also my experience, sometimes firms are all in for a single heroic BIM manager that's going to solve all the problems in all the projects, but it's too much. So it's better to have more decentralized approach where the responsibilities are split, right? So you have maybe someone who's taking care of the families, someone's keeping track of model health. It's still good to have kind of a main person responsible for model health overall. But I don't think all the weight of it should fall on a single person, and it's the responsibility of the entire team to keep track of it. Also found out that it's important to educate the leadership, right? So the partners, sometimes they just don't understand the point of high quality Revit files, right? So they will say, well, we're trying to do great architecture. We're not trying to build an award-winning Revit model, right? So that's sometimes something I hear as an excuse to kind of cut corners. But I feel that with good education, by educating leadership, you can tell them, no, it's actually important. It helps us to have great buildings because we have more accurate model, which means less problem with cost. And yeah, overall, it's going to help the project, right? It's not a waste of time. So by educating the leadership, it can help with this. Again, I feel we're getting there, right? Like 10 years ago, it was much more difficult to make this understand. We're getting there, but it's still not perfect. It depends on the people in charge. So again, with the idea of the technical depth, I've had the idea of keeping a ledger. You can use a tool such as Trello or Asana, something else, which is a Kanban board, where you can see you have 3 columns: backlog to fix, currently fixing, and done fixing. So whenever there's something wrong inside of the model, you can create a new card and where you say what has to be fixed, right? So if you have cheap 2D workaround, it's okay if you have need deliverables, but just make sure that you go back and fix it and do it the proper way. And so you can have a huge backlog of everything that you need to be fixed. And you move in the middle column, currently fixing everything that needs to be done urgently or the next in line. And you can assign a person, you can assign a deadline to it to ensure that things are moving on. It's just really important to keep track of all those things, because else if you just rely on your memory, you will forget and things will get lost. And yeah, defining clear roles. I know in a project, for example, where I like to have someone who's responsible for families, the main person responsible for families in the project, someone else who's mostly responsible for the quality of the modeling. So again, it's just to me the idea that you shouldn't have a single BIM manager that keeps track of everything else, and the responsibility of good model health, it doesn't matter to other teammates. So it's important to set clear rules. As I've said, personally, I like to have a clean day every Friday. I get rid of warnings, I delete unused views, you can delete unnamed reference planes. Everything weird in a model is going to be cleaned out, but you warn the users in advance, right? So you tell them, well, if your views has not been properly named, it's going to be deleted. So any view called copy one, copy one, copy one, it's deleted. I sometimes see lots of 3D views, right? So you tell them, give a proper name to your 3D view, else, again, it's going to be deleted. Else you're going to make them this little face when you come to them. Okay, almost done, folks. Yeah, okay. In terms of management as a BIM manager, what I like to do is keep track of all the bad practices. So if I see a mistake that's being repeated over and over again in a project, I like to put it out or write it down somewhere and keep track of it. Take a screenshot. I have some documentation. And if I see like 5 different people have done the same mistake, I can send an email with screenshots saying, here's what's wrong. Here's the actual way you should do it instead. So that's a good way to do it. I also like to use Notion. Some people might use SharePoint, where I will record a video using Loom, which is a super fast way to record a video, and put a database basically of information. It can be specific to the project, where here's the project we've been having in this project. Here's the way to fix it. Here's how to avoid it. But sometimes even that is not enough because people don't always read the emails, right? So they might receive a good practice email, but they just don't want to read it. So a good way that I found is to have, let's say, a monthly short meeting of 30 minutes where you recap, okay, here's the problems we've been facing on this model. Here's the bad modeling techniques that we've seen. It's like, here's a reminder of the way you should actually name them, or here's a reminder of the way you should name views, and so on, right? So when it's a meeting, when it's a calendar, people have to attend, and yeah, they won't have the choice to be reminded. So something I say often to different clients is the knowledge should not stay stuck into an expert's head. So if you're the BIM manager, people shouldn't have to come to you and ask questions to get information. It should be part of your database. There should be knowledge somewhere. It could be in meetings. It could be recorded. But they shouldn't have to have a one-on-one meeting to extract the information out of you. So especially if I have a question that is being asked of me twice, well, it's like, well, apparently it's a good question. Let's write it down somewhere. And next time I can send a link, right? So I don't have to repeat myself and have the same 20 minutes meeting every single time. And something that I found very helpful, I've talked about the idea of a database of knowledge. It can be with Notion, it can be with SharePoint. You can have a mini database of information and training for a specific project, especially larger ones. So for example, especially at the end, I'm sure you all went through this. At the end of the project, there's a rush and 5 more people are added to the project. And it's typically at that point that the model health starts to suffer because the people have not worked, are not familiar with the model, and they start to do their own things, right? Remember when we talked about the maverick person at the beginning of the session? Well, they get in and they kind of start to mess things around. So what I like to do is whenever there's a new person that's going to start on a model, I will book a 30 minutes meeting with them and show them around, show them the project browser, go into a 3D view, explain the key points of the model and how things are built, and maybe remind them of a few good practices. So it can be that. In addition, they can have a Notion page or SharePoint where this information can be set as well. So this image is basically like you have information about the project in terms of model health, and you plug it into the person's head that's coming to the project, and now they know model health. Okay. Yeah, people are saying that it could be a Teams group too. Yeah, it could be. Chat is good, but it's also good to have pages that are a bit like database with screenshots and videos that is more like a evergreen. People mentioned that new format is good for that. I'm not that familiar with new format.
Thanks for watching this live masterclass replay. If you want to unlock the entire catalog of sessions, become a member at bimpure.com.